Forest Society of Maine recently celebrated a milestone, its 40th anniversary. It is a statewide land trust with a particular focus on preserving Maine's Northwoods.
Karen Tilburg served as the president of the Forest Society of Maine for 14 years until she retired about a month ago. She's the author of a new book called Loving the Northwoods, which tells much of the story of land conservation in Maine from 1990 to 2015, a cause she's been involved in her entire adult life. Karen Tilburg has a clear memory of when her love affair began with the Northwoods.
It started in 1979 when I got a job with the International Backpackers Association. Big name, small group.
Working out of Lincoln, she led hikers on week-long trips along the Appalachian Trail.
We typically started at A-Ball Bridge and then went down a section of the AT, and that section now is burned into my memory.
The epic scale of the Northwoods. Some 12 million acres in all, 3.5 times the size of Connecticut, had touched her soul.
And it goes on forever, and I felt that in me, and it just gave me this sense of awe, and it was very humbling to me. And I fell in love with the place.
Karen Tilburg's book tells the story of conservation in the Northwoods from 1990 to 2015, a time when the once dominant paper companies started to rapidly unload huge parcels of land they had logged for decades.
Boom, boom, boom. In 7 years, almost half of Maine's forests were sold by the paper companies at the time.
So when the paper companies began to pull back from Maine around 1990, it created new opportunities, and in particular opportunities to conserve land in a way that had never been possible before, right?
That's right. And so when they sold, it was really the first time then in a long time that there were these opportunities for the state and for conservation groups to try to work with the new owners to identify some conservation lands.
Conservationists at that time found that easements were an especially effective way to preserve and protect land from development.
When this whole era began in the late 1980s, Maine had about 5% of its land in conservation. At the end of that 25-year period, we were at 20%. We went from 5% to 20% of our land having some form of conservation.
In Maine's Northwoods, there has long been tension between preservation and economic development. Tilburg believes Maine has, for the most part, struck a good balance.
If you're a logger or work in the forest products sector, you know, the forest is still there, and most of the easements allow for forest management to continue. If you're someone that just works in the local community nearby, you can still go on the land and hunt and fish, or walk and hike, or ski, or snowmobile in many cases.
The reason why people went along with conservation, Tilburg says, is that it aligned with local values and traditions.
What I think was the magic in the solutions that came forth was that it held on to what people wanted and loved. It didn't change things. It sort of was a bulwark against change that they wouldn't have control over.
You've hiked in the Northwoods, you've traveled around the Northwoods, you've spent your career working to preserve the Northwoods. Where in the Northwoods have you not been that you still want to go to?
There are a couple mountains on the very western border that I haven't hiked yet, and so I'd like to try those in the next year or so. I've been to a lot of places though, and there's so much beauty here. There's so much wonder, and it's an inspirational land, and much of it's open for people to enjoy and benefit from.
So much beauty, but also going forward, that land plays an increasingly important part in addressing climate change because the trees absorb so much in the way of greenhouse gases, crucial role there. Again, the name of Karen Tilburg's new book is Loving the Northwoods.